Greetings all, Ferrariman601 here. Welcome to another F rant video. Not quite a rant, but more like an F admonishment video here. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for the British Grand Prix Round 2 Political Boogaloo. Yes, of course, I'm talking about the situation that has transpired today regarding the protest lodged by Renault against Racing Point in the design of the RP20, the Formula One car fielded this year by Racing Point. Everybody knows, and we have known since the start of preseason testing all the way back in January of a normal 2020, that existed at one time apparently, when everybody looked at the Racing Point and said, that looks an awful lot like the Mercedes W10 from 2019. And apparently a lot of the Formula One teams thought so as well, and Renault thought so with enough conviction that they told the FIA, we'd like you to take a look at that, please and thank you, and let us win again sometime, thanks. So the FIA have issued a verdict today, and in short, they found that the Racing Point car is illegal. Specifically, they have found that the Racing Point car is illegal with regard to the design of its brake ducts, particularly the rear brake ducts. They say that they resemble the Mercedes brake ducts a little bit too much. You copied it, or you stole them, or whatever. However you procured them is kind of irrelevant at this point. But the brake duct design, you stole that. Here's a €400,000 fine, and give us 15 constructors' points, please and thank you. Awesome. And that's it. Now, the FIA, in my opinion, have entirely lost the plot. Yes, brake ducts, copying that component, however they procured them, if Mercedes actually gave them the components or whatnot, fine. But you said that a part on the car is illegal, and you haven't declared the car illegal. In other words, you have declared the car illegal, but you're saying, it's too much work to redesign these things, so you can run it anyway. We'll just, don't do it again next year. Pray tell, I have two questions, and they concern two events that have occurred in somewhat recent history. Number one, something that perhaps you're not thinking about, the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, wherein Renault entered into a conspiracy between team manager Flavio Briatore and Nelson Piquet Jr., who was the second driver at the time. Remember him? Utterly forgettable career. However, Flavio told Nelson to crash. Nelson crashed. Fernando Alonso was able to get a pit stop ahead of everybody else, and then he won the race in a car that had no business winning anything that year. A year later, the FIA said, wait, you did this? Why did you do this? Bad, Renault, bad. But of course it was far too late to do anything about the 2008 championship, so nobody lost anything, and the Singapore Grand Prix of 2008 remains won by Fernando Alonso. However, Flavio Briatore was handed about a lifetime ban from the paddock, something like that, and Pat Simmons, I believe it was also issued a ban, which has since expired, and I think he is back in the paddock, at least in some capacity now. But regardless, there was that situation wherein a team did something naughty, flew under the radar for a year, and then the FIA went back in time and issued penalties for something that had long since elapsed and nobody was thinking about anymore. So we have an ex post facto action there. Remember that later on. But 1 year prior to that, 2007, we had Spygate. Yes, that is when McLaren procured data from Ferrari via a Ferrari employee, the late Nigel Stepney, gave this information to Mike Coughlin, who is currently unemployed as far as I'm aware. At least he's unemployed in Formula One. He said, yep, this is all the technical data and wind tunnel stuff from the F2007. Have fun with this. And then McLaren designed the MP422 to be superior to the F2007. But they did not copy it. Interesting distinction to remember there. However, McLaren were thrown out of the World Championship in 2007, all the constructors' points gone, and they were fined $100 million for being bad. That brings us to today. Racing Point have their car declared illegal, basically. They say it's because of brake ducts, but anybody with half a brain can look at the W10 Mercedes and the RP20 Racing Point and say they are very much the same car, at least outwardly. There's nothing that we really can say about the internals of the W10 or the RP20 because Formula One cars are always under lock and key, and if you get within 6 kilometers of one unsupervised, I think some snipers start popping out and taking shots at you. But regardless, you have a car that appears to be a copy of the car that won the Constructors' Championship last year. It was just declared illegal by the FIA. But at the same time, the FIA have said that this car can continue to race. Just don't do it again in 2021. Ferrari, McLaren, and Renault have now appealed the verdict that was handed out by the FIA today regarding the Racing Point car. And this is a very interesting development, particularly because of McLaren going back to Spygate in 2007, where they were thrown out of the World Championship for having a car that was designed using illegally gotten data. If Racing Point are allowed to race with a car that the FIA have already said is illegal, McLaren, Zach Brown, hello, how are you, Zach? I'm still mad at you about the Indy 500, but we can come to amends on this one. I'd be breaking down the doors at Place de la Concorde in Paris, asking Jean Todt where the hell his 2007 Constructors' Championship is, right? And if you're Renault, or if you're Flavio Briatore, I'm going to be knocking down the doors at Place de la Concorde and asking Jean Todt where the hell his paddock pass is again. Because Flavio Briatore could fix Renault. He could. He won championships with Benetton. He won championships as Renault, basically the same team, though he could fix Renault, but he's not allowed to. Pray tell, Jean Todt, why are you allowing an illegal car to race, basically? When you've thrown people out of the championship for doing far less in the case of Flavio Briatore, and McLaren for stealing data but designing a completely different car based on the data that they stole. It's an interesting development. But it also has a couple of very interesting implications no matter which way the FIA go. Permutation number 1. The RP20 is allowed to continue racing for the balance of the year. The FIA have said that it's illegal. It's under appeal again, that verdict. We'll see what happens with that. However, if the RP20 is declared legal, even though the FIA have said that the concurrence with the Mercedes only extends through the brake ducts per the verdict, that sets a precedent for allowing an illegally designed car to race. Brabham BT46B, anyone? Tyrrell P34, anyone? McLaren MP418, anyone? You know what I mean. All of a sudden, if you have cars which clearly fall afoul of the sporting regulations, if not the technical regulations, if they're allowed to race, then the technical regulations and the sporting regulations effectively are rendered meaningless. Because if you're allowed to break the rules, and the only thing you have to do is pay a relatively meager fine, I mean, 400,000 euro is pocket change for a Formula One team, if you can basically rock up to Silverstone with any car you want and pay a fine and then go racing, well, hell, somebody had better build a Red Bull X2010 or something, because apparently it's legal as long as you can pay the piper, right? The other thing that this means, though, is perhaps more realistic, and perhaps something that's going to happen. And that's if Racing Point are thrown out of the championship for doing what they've done in copying the Mercedes, because, again, look at the 2019 Mercedes W10 and look at the 2020 RP20 and tell me that they're different cars. They ain't. Sorry. If Racing Point are thrown out of the Constructors' Championship a la McLaren 2007, a couple of things are going to happen. One, Racing Point is due to be taken over as a constructor by Aston Martin in 2021. If the team that you're about to buy gets thrown out of the championship, if you're on the board of directors at Aston Martin, aren't you going to think twice about that acquisition? Yeah, I think you are. And with Formula One not having a new constructor entering the field since 2010, we had 3 new constructors come in 2010. We had Caterham or Lotus or whatever the hell they were, Virgin, and what was the third one? HRT, Hispania. All 3 of them are gone. I had trouble remembering the names because they were around for about a tenth of a second in the grand scheme of things. Not one new constructor has entered Formula One since. A couple have tried, but the FIA basically said, man, no, we want our stupid engines. So then Volkswagen said no, Porsche said no, Cosworth said no, and now they're building things like the Valkyrie and the Gordon Murray T50. Awesome, by the way. But there are better things to do in the world than Formula One, and if Aston Martin have no choice but to buy a team that just got thrown out of the championship, they're not going to enter the championship in the first place. And that's going to make Formula One look awfully silly, and it's also just going to leave us with 9 constructors. How does a field of 18 cars sound? Not so awesome. A field of 20 cars isn't so awesome now, but I digress. The other thing, Where would Racing Point have gotten that information from, if not the technical know-how, the drawings, the blueprints, the wind tunnel data, if not full-up components? They would have gotten that from Mercedes. Yes, Mercedes AMG Petronas, the cars driven by Valtteri Bottas and superstar Lewis Hamilton. If Mercedes are implicated in having given Racing Point, almost called them Jordan there for a second, they're really Jordan, but if Mercedes are implicated in having given Racing Point anything with regard to the design of the W10 or the W11 that was then used in the RP20, Mercedes will also be thrown out of the championship. Which means the only team to win anything in the last 6 years will be thrown out of the championship. And the only driver to win anything consistently for the last 6 years, Lewis Hamilton, will also effectively be thrown out of the championship. Through no fault of his, mind you. Which means that Formula One's only headline grabbers in Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton are on the precipice of potentially being excluded from 2020, if not banned from the sport, depending on what happens with this appeal of the protest of the Racing Point RP20. What's going to happen? I think the RP20 is going to be allowed to stand, which means that the technical regulations and the sporting regulations effectively become nullified because apparently you could rock up with anything you want, pay €400,000, and go racing. If they did get thrown out, though, Formula One as we know it ceases to exist, because then that's Aston Martin's entry goodbye, that's Mercedes saying goodbye, that's Lance Stroll's career done, that's Lawrence Stroll pulling any other money that he has out, that's Toto Wolff pulling any other money that he has out, Mercedes is out, the engine supply for Williams, McLaren in 2021, that's gone. It's a real slippery slope, ladies and gentlemen, and I don't think it's too ridiculous to imagine either permutation coming to fruition. However, whichever thing ultimately happens, it damages the sport severely. One, we're going to have a crisis of regulations, or two, we're just going to have a crisis of who's left. Troubling times indeed, if you are a Formula One fan, particularly if you happen to be of a Mercedes persuasion. At any rate, though, that's my 2 cents on this. Do let me know what you think, and if you do insist on calling me mean names, at least be creative with it, because I do get a nice laugh out of them. Until next time, though, thank you all very much for listening. Ferrari Mount 601 saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.